Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is Weekend Edition. We'll have our roundtable today with some other guests that you will have a chance to hear from in just a minute. We're going to be talking about all sorts of things, ranging from the election this week in Eric Cantor's district, the 7th District, and the election of David Brat over Eric Cantor, what that might mean for other elections. And during this election season, that would be enough to talk about. But, of course, that also relates to the issue of immigration and this humanitarian crisis at the border right now and what that might mean. If that's not enough, of course, we have jihadists marching towards Baghdad and Penna Dexter. Other than that, pretty simple day, but we've got lots to talk about today, don't we?
Kerby, it seems that a lot of the things we have to talk about today, they're momentous and sort of earth-shattering for some people, and they surprised us this week, but a lot of them have been brewing for a while, so we'll sort of unpack those stories.
We have a roundtable of women that are certainly going to help give us perspective. Certainly, of course, Penna Dexter, co-host of Point of View, but also Michelle Smith's been with us before, State Director for Concerned Women for America, been very much involved in a number of campaigns. Matter of fact, last time we had Ken Paxton and Michelle, or Angela, on the program, you were the one that suggested that we might get her testimony. So thank you once again for joining us here on Point of View.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kerby, for having me again today.
Debbie Georgatos is also with us, and author of the book, Ladies, Can We Talk? America Needs Our Vote. She has been with us a number of times before and also joins the roundtable, has really been a speaker and really articulated many of these positions and perspectives, and so we are grateful that you're joining us here today as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's, if we can, Penna, we'll go start with you. Eric Cantor. A lot of individuals have been trying to spin this, but it does seem to me that, as we'll talk about in just a few minutes, his stand on immigration was at least one of the reasons why a relative unknown by the name of David Brat, who, by the way, spent about as much on his campaign as the Cantor campaign spent on steak dinners. I found out from Gary Bauer that is not an urban myth. It was actually documented. He spent about $300,000 on this campaign and was able to significantly best Eric Cantor in the 7th District there in Virginia.
I think a lot of people were amazed, including Eric Cantor himself. And George Will wrote a column about it this week, and one of the things he said, because as you mentioned, a lot of people are attributing the loss to a stance on immigration. But George Will said that this could actually politically do a few things, and one of the top things it could do would be to discourage Jeb Bush from running for president. Because if immigration was such a big issue with these Republicans in Virginia, then perhaps a person as pro-amnesty and pro-immigration comprehensive reform as Jeb Bush is, might see that it might not be worth running, since he's sort of on the fence about it anyway.
You know, it's kind of interesting. The immigration was considered last week at the Texas Republican Convention, and I was there, and Michelle, I know you were there as well. Was perhaps the hottest topic of all the platforms, was it not?
Absolutely, Kerby. I think we definitely sent a message. The grassroots took over that convention and made sure that in Texas, which is one of our strongest issues we're dealing with, we'll talk about later, I'm sure, is immigration here in Texas. And, you know, a lot of people are trying to convince us that amnesty is not amnesty, or worker visas are not amnesty, which we all know the truth on that. And so, yes, definitely a very important issue, and a very strong message was sent.
Debbie, let me come to you. A lot of people are trying to say that, well, it was just maybe anti-establishment or something like that. What's your read on the loss of Eric Cantor this week?
Well, if I had to put one word over all the issues, I would use the word elitism. There's something that's happened in Washington with people who've served a long time, especially those like Eric Cantor, who enjoy seeking office and seeking leadership positions as he did and was continuing to do. And this elitism idea, what I mean by that is, on amnesty, he did say many contradictory things over the course of the last year. He would take different tacts, and it always seemed like he was trying to get his finger in the wind and figure what would work well. And it didn't really feel, I think, to the grassroots like he was listening to the grassroots. It was like, we'll figure it out. We're the smart guys in Washington, and we're not going to listen to you. There was a very specific thing I read about, though, that I was so surprised I hadn't heard about, which was in the state of Virginia, there was a lot of resentment among county party chairs and grassroots activists against Eric Cantor in this primary because of his conduct it was all over their Facebook, at least, writing what had happened. What seemed to be that he and some of his allies worked to oust people who were delegates to the state convention,
Wow.
were grassroots types, and get in establishment types that Eric Cantor thought were more malleable. Again, is that elitism thread runs through that. We're just going to put our people in who, in fact, there was even a bigger point. They were trying to change the system of primaries there from primaries over conventions, because Eric Cantor and establishment people would have more power if they had a primary. If they had a primary instead of it's a state law thing where the money people have more control if there are primaries. And reduce the power of the grassroots.
Wow, without a convention. Yep. Penna Dexter, this is the first time I know of in American history where a majority leader of either party was defeated in a primary. Is this significant?
And we got majority leaders in the House in 1899, so they've been around a while. And yeah, it is amazing because, when you think of it, if you've got a congressman in your district and he's majority leader or in some leadership position, that's a real reason to vote to keep him in because he's so powerful in the Congress. So I think it's bigger in that sense. Now, of course, there's the Tea Party faction everybody talks about. The National Tea Party never got involved in the Cantor race at all. Local Tea Parties did, and they backed Bratt. And so, in a sense, though, you can't really credit the Tea Party with this win at all. But I think what it does do is shows that some of these real conservative ideas, constitutional fidelity and things like that, are very important in these districts that are, was a safe Republican district and very conservative. They're very important. And when, to the extent that someone starts to move away from that, it's bad for them. Because Eric Cantor, you've got to remember, part of the growth of the Tea Party happened under his being in power in Congress, and he was supportive of it. I've heard him speak many times at the Values Voters Summit, and he was always a very good speaker and knew the issues and spoke to the conservatives who were there. Now, that may just be part of who he is as a politician, but he certainly has, I think, concentrated in recent years on his leadership position, perhaps making that next jump to Speaker of the House, which isn't going to happen now.
Well, here's a man that has been pro-life. I've had Tony Perkins talk about that. He was pro-Israel. I have Gary Bowers talk about that. So on so many issues, check. It almost seems like, though, the issue of immigration could be the deal breaker, because most of us around the table on almost all of his votes would have no disagreement. I suspect a lot of people, you have relatives in that district, in the 7th District, probably liked him in a lot of ways, but immigration might have been the deal breaker.
It was interesting. We were at a family event last weekend. That's why I wasn't here last Friday. And these relatives live in that district. I don't even think they voted in the primary because I don't think they were back in their district to do so. Maybe they did. They're not super active or anything, but they are conservatives. And they've been disappointed recently with Eric Cantor. That's just the opinion of someone who's just sort of a citizen there, not a real activist. And as we heard from Debbie, the activists seem to be disappointed. So the turnout there in this election was so surprisingly high. And it turns out that it was a turnout for this sort of new guy.
Yeah.
Mr.
David
Bratt.
a lot of people are trying to say, well, they didn't have a good turnout. No, it was 37% higher than it was before. So that wasn't the case. Or it was the rain. Or no, it wasn't that either. So we'll come back just briefly and talk about what that might mean in Mississippi or in a few other primaries. And then we'll move on to this issue of immigration. It's a hot topic. We'll cover that right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Does a solar eclipse provide evidence of intelligent design? That is what first got astronomer Guillermo Gonzalez thinking as he watched a total eclipse in India in 1995. In order to have a solar eclipse, you need to have an object come in front of the sun. Essentially, you could watch a partial solar eclipse on any planet in our solar system that has a moon, but Earth is the only planet where a total solar eclipse can be seen. As I point out in my book, A Biblical Point of View on Intelligent Design, the unique experience of a solar eclipse on planet Earth appears to be more than just coincidence. There are a number of reasons why only the Earth can have a total solar eclipse. Our moon is 1/400th the size of the sun, and the sun is 400 times away from the Earth and from the moon. Therefore, when the moon comes between the sun and the Earth, a small area of the Earth experiences a total solar eclipse in which the sun is fully blocked out by the moon. Now, the scientific benefit of a total solar eclipse is significant. Because the moon blocks out the sun, scientists have the ability to see and measure the sun's corona. Normally, the sun is too bright for us to see the corona, but a total solar eclipse allows scientists to measure the light spectrum of the corona, and much of what we know today about stars comes from this measurement. The fact that our Earth experiences a total solar eclipse of the sun makes our planet unique in the solar system, probably unique among many other solar systems. Add to this many other factors, such as the fact that our moon is the right size, shape, and orbit for human life. The moon provides the gravitational balance between the Earth and it and provides us with diurnal tides. You could accurately say that the moon makes life here on Earth possible. Those are just a few reasons why many scientists see intelligent design in our moon and even in a solar eclipse. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, we have an opportunity here to hear from a number of individuals around the round table, but in just a few minutes we will open up the phones to give you a chance to join our conversation as well. Let me, just before we move on to another topic, Penna Dexter, let me come to you first and talk about what is the possible implication? Some people might say that Eric Cantor, it's a one-off, as they call it. Well, I don't think so. I do believe that this could have an impact on, for example, our listeners in Mississippi and a case there and some of these other primaries. But what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I don't know if this is sort of an anomaly or if this is a trend. I mean, it's really hard to tell. I mean, I think what we'll do is we'll see what happens in Mississippi, and if that goes for Mr. McDaniel and Thad Cochran is ousted, then I think we might see a trend here. But it's interesting because I just want to go back to a couple of the things George Will wrote because they were interesting and things that I wouldn't have thought of, but they make sense when you look at it. And one is Paul Ryan, because Paul Ryan is trying to decide right now between heading toward a presidential run or leadership in the House of Representatives. And so now that you've got this one person taken out of the way, this might change, keep him in the House, running for, either Speaker or Majority Leader or something at some point later. And then, of course, Ted Cruz probably emboldened in his presidential aspirations just because of a conservative win like this. And I'm sure he's very encouraged by this. And also the fact that the power of money. Yes, money is important in elections. It's very powerful. In general elections, it's really powerful. But big ideas and sticking to your principles are important. And I think that's Eric Cantor's. I mean, if you could delineate one lesson from it, is no matter how high you rise up in the leadership of the House, you've got to pay attention to your constituents and stick to your principles.
That's for sure. Money does not buy votes. When you're outspent 25-1 and you win, it shows, at least in the primaries. Money is important. Money is the mother's milk of politics, but that's more in the general election than it is in the primaries. David Georgatos, I want to get your comments for just a minute about what happened in the 7th District. Do you think it plays out anywhere else in the country?
Oh, I think it will. I think the backdrop of this primary in Virginia was all that's occurring nationally on the immigration subject, the continuing floating talk of amnesty, especially from the Democrats. Everyone's noticing what's happening in the southern borders. We have now children pouring over, and that was occurring even prior to this primary. I think amnesty is coming to the forefront of people, or immigration policy is coming to the forefront of people's thinking, and they want firm, clear answers from their candidates. And I think maybe that's part of what they didn't see in Eric Cantor was a firmness about, I really mean I won't stand for amnesty. And even the notion of the DREAM Act for conservatives, which Eric Cantor kind of played with and talked about maybe be okay, and he signaled about maybe some children's things would be okay. He signaled he seems soft. And I think when people are concerned about amnesty, they want to hear leadership and firmness.
Yes. Well, and again, if you're living in the state of Texas and you see the humanitarian crisis, you'll be paying attention to immigration. But Virginia's pretty far away from the Texas-Arizona border, and nevertheless, we saw that implication. Let's, if we can, we mentioned just a minute ago, Michelle Smith, you were at the Texas Republican Convention, and one of the things I thought I might mention is Penna's comment about Ted Cruz. He did rather well. I guess you would say that he gave the best speech of all the speakers, and that he was competing, if you will, with Rand Paul and Rick Perry and a number of others. But talk about knocking it out of the park.
Yes. I mean, Penna just talked about sticking to your principles. And I have to say that, we see whether you agree with Senator Cruz or not, where he stands. And it's he is such a voice for the people. And, you talk about Cantor's loss and you wonder, the people, what they really care about is to know that people really care about them. Mm-hmm. And Ted Cruz, whether it's fighting for immigration and calling this a humanitarian crisis and calling out our president for where he is not being strong, or standing in front of the White House and calling for our president to do something about the Sudanese woman, Texas clearly sent a message with the straw poll results, and they said overwhelmingly at the convention that 43.5% of Texans believe that Senator Cruz would make an excellent president.
Well, and just amazing as they are getting ready for him to come out there, they pull off the podium, they pull off the teleprompters. It's just a flat stage. He gets up there without a note, without a teleprompter. There are very few people I've seen speak so articulately without an and or an maybe an Alan Keyes used to be able to do that. There are very few people, and you watch Ted Cruz, and I'm a pretty good speaker, and I'm sitting there saying, I can learn from this man. It is incredible how gifted he is and how many facts and figures literally come out of his head and how he is able to make the case in such a compelling way.
That speaks to the idea that an intellect in a politician is important. It's very helpful. And Ted Cruz, he's offended a lot of people because he's in D.C. because he stood for things. But really, he also is a very good persuader. When you hear him speak and you allow him to speak, he makes the arguments so well because he's been doing it since he was a kid. Mm-hmm. He's been debating and giving speeches since he was very young. He's well practiced and very talented and very brilliant. And that's why I've always appreciated the fact that he was in the Senate. I wonder if, he'd be better off for another few years in the Senate before running for president. I've always thought that. And that's just kind of, I think we need that kind of an intellect there to kind of help move the Senate along, although he may have made his bed there in opposing some things. But one more thing about him, and I think it may have been part of this Cantor defeat, is the idea that you can go to the line and oppose things, like shutting down the government last fall, things like that. He's been willing and brave enough to do that, and I think that has shown to the conservatives in the country that people like Eric Cantor, it's kind of diminished them in our eyes.
Agreed.
I think so. And when we're talking about him, I might just mention we've posted a video here of his Q&A with the current Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Was that at least masterful?
At least.
First of all, just so well done. And then he gets one of those charts up there. And I would encourage everybody to watch it. It's only about 7 minutes long. And I think it will encourage you because, first of all, he is explaining that, yes, we have this crisis at the border, and there is every reason to believe it's due to policies. Now we know that even in some of the embassies in not only Mexico, but in El Salvador and Honduras and other places, they were saying, children will not be deported, because he shows that the increase in the number of people at our border is up, but the radical increase of children going across the border is due in large part to a change in policies. And we now hear Border Patrol agents that have to change diapers at the border. And anybody that had any question as to whether or not we have a porous border, just imagine that 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds are walking across the border, then giving themselves up to the Border Patrol and ending up in some military base.
Well, I'll just say that in that video, Senator Cruz, which I didn't realize the number, he actually said 37% today are coming across the border that are minors, underage, 37%. So we're not talking about, that is a very large number of children without parents.
And everybody is saying that if this continues, that number will be up to 150,000. Gary Bauer just did an interview with him, which will air next week, 160,000. Well, we are talking about something that's unprecedented, because it's one thing to have 150,000 people that just come over and the Border Patrol has to take care of. It's another thing to have children. All of us have kids. Remember when you took your kids to the mall, when you took them to Six Flags?
Yeah, you're scared to death you're going to lose them.
Yeah, try and just keep track of, and all the needs that they have that an adult does not have. Just amazing what we are dealing with. So when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about this issue of immigration and get your comments, but I did want to mention that we are in the month of June. We're coming to the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30th, and it is critical that we end our fiscal year on a strong financial footing. And if you go to our website, you'll not only see that video that we've talked about by Ted Cruz and some of the articles that we're going to be talking about today, but you'll also see a button that says double your donation now, a $25,000 matching fund. Let's, if we can, talk a little bit about what you can do to help us financially.
When a person has faith in God and believes he is responsible to Him, that faith creates virtue. Virtue causes people to willingly obey the law. When the internal control of virtue is diminished, the outside control of government must increase to restrain the people. As government control increases, freedom decreases. As the power of government grows stronger, faith in a power higher than the government becomes an enemy of the state. The government will then seek to restrain faith to increase its power, and the cycle goes on and on. Will you help Point of View equip people to make faith an active part of their lives? Our fiscal year end is around the corner, and it's critical that we end the month of June with a solid financial foundation. A few of our key partners have generously created a $25,000 matching fund. So when you give during this critical time, your gift will be matched up to $25,000. I ask you to join us in this important work that God has called Point of View to do. Together, we can make a powerful difference.
Anything you can do to help us out would be greatly appreciated. Again, if you have never supported this ministry, I might encourage you to think about doing so right now, because this is a way in which your gift will be doubled. A gift of $50 becomes $100. A gift of $100 becomes $200. It's very simple. You can go to our website, pointofview.net, click on that button that says double your donation now. Or if you'd like to write to us, you can certainly make a check out to Point of View and send it to Point of View, Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. I hope you appreciate the kind of news and information, commentary, evaluation of so many issues from a biblical point of view that we do, and I would encourage you to support this ministry. Let's take a break. We will continue our conversation with our roundtable on Weekend Edition right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition, we have a roundtable of guests, but we also want to hear from you as well. 1-800-351-1212. Immigration on the docket at the moment, especially this humanitarian crisis at the border and what that really means. Penna, let me come to you just before we take some more phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. But we have a situation that is grown larger by the moment and is not going to be resolved anytime soon.
It's actually pretty shocking, and I'm just looking at a press release that came out of Senator Ted Cruz's office talking about these parents bringing their little boys and little girls there, handing them over to international global criminal cartels.
Wow.
That smuggle human beings in. They put kids, among other places, on top of fast-moving freight trains. They are criminals who sexually assault, and sometimes murder these children, little girls, sometimes being sold into prostitution and sex slavery. I know CWA is working on that issue, so there's going to be a lot of work to do on that issue with this. But the other part of this is just the absolute moving away, turning from the rule of law, and just flouting it completely. And I think that you sent us, all of us, an article about why this might be the motivation. We can talk about that later. But just to turn us liberal. It's another way for this administration to get the liberal hooks into this country. Because in California, when in 1986, when amnesty was passed, in that state, I mean, I lived there, so did you. And it was a fairly conservative state at that point. And the state is like the People's Republic of, whatever. It's so liberal now, and it's so different in demographic composition because of the influx of illegals to that state. Elections are stolen, all sorts of things. Well, I think that's what they're trying to do to the whole country. And this is just another one of the tactics. Another one of the ways to get this done.
By the way, if you want some of the statistics on what we're talking about here, the second article, Humanitarian Crisis, Because We Didn't Secure the Border, is a piece about Ted Cruz, and we have the video, and as you watch that, you begin to see some of the statistics, facts, and figures that Penna mentioned. Debbie, let me come to you as well, because this is of concern about how we get ourselves out of this. If we have 150,000, 160,000 young people under the age of 18 right now being housed at Lackland Air Force Base or wherever they might be, sometimes in cages. It's just horrendous what is taking place there. We've got to do something, and I fear that the something will be, well, let's just bring them all in because we can't deport them.
I do too. I think we should look at this really as the American left using, and I understand that both the Republicans and Democrats have failed to secure the border, but this particular episode of children coming across the border, it didn't happen without cause. It didn't happen for no reason. It is not an arbitrary thing that all of a sudden all these children are coming, not just from Mexico, but even some from Honduras and other South American countries. And there is word out there that America is going to do amnesty. The talk of amnesty is floating around Washington and around the world, and America's a place everyone wants to be. So I think that in fact, there's an association of ex-Border Patrol agents who actually issued a formal statement saying this is an orchestrated project. This does not happen arbitrarily. And Kerby, your point about once these kids are here, I think what it does is create chaos and fear, and people, American people, the left hopes, will just throw up their hands and say, okay, fine, do something with them, make a new category, take care of them. But those kids are being used by the left to expand government power over the immigration system, to push an immigration agenda that the people don't want.
How orchestrated is this? We mentioned it, Penna, you mentioned a minute ago that these two professors that were at Columbia University, they were there when Barry Obama, now known as Barack Obama, was at Columbia University, and the professors Andrew Cloward and Francis Fox Piven. It's known as the Cloward-Piven idea. And back then, they said that the way to bring about a liberal movement in America would be, in their case, to overwhelm the system. Now, the system they were talking about back then was welfare, and that you get more people on food stamps, you get more people on disability. Well, that sounds familiar. And indeed, that is what you would do to eventually force the country towards a more liberal position. Well, if you accept that, it seems to me that here, as Stephen King has said, and Stephen Stockman, to mention two individuals who have been on the program with us before, they believe that this is an attempt to flood the border with illegals following this orchestrated idea. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a real possibility. As I mentioned, the rule of law is being flouted to a great degree. And, just to take care of this problem, is going to require a liberal solution unless we just send them back, because we're going to have some sort of a department or some kind of housing or something, some kind of a program to take care of these people. And then, you've got Americans very angry about it, of course. Mm-hmm. Our taxpayer money will be going to take care of people who've been just dropped off here. And yeah, I do think, the Cloward-Piven phenomenon is probably at work here. I think these guys, Mr. Stockman, Steve Stockman, who's a friend of mine, and Steve King they're onto something. Don't know what we do about it right now. They've dropped a problem on our border. We got to figure out what to do.
Look, Kerby, this is an instance where the president can make a real difference, where he can show leadership. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. This is an issue that is, as Senator Cruz has said multiple times, a humanitarian issue. We have got to shut the border. There's no other way to do it. We can't talk about any immigration issue until that border is sealed. And we cannot handle the floods of people that are coming across that border. And let me say, as a leader, the very first thing I would do if I was in President Obama's, I would be right front and center of those children and see for myself what's happening. You cannot make decisions from an office in Washington when this is happening on the border. We've got state representatives here in Texas that are going down there to see what's going on. And I think a true leader would be on the front lines.
There was a testimony the other day, and it was one of the people in Department of Health of Homeland Security, not the one that is actually on the video with Ted Cruz, but it was further down. But that individual said in a press conference, well, we are going to investigate this, and we're going to go down in a couple of weeks.
No.
I thought, a couple of weeks?
That's thousands and thousands of children.
What? Is this not urgent in the part of the president? Is this not a front burner issue? And apparently it doesn't seem to be so far.
It certainly does not. And, one great point that Congressman King made in talking about this issue and whether this is orchestrated is if you were trying to stop it, you'd be spending your money flying reinforcements down to the border to secure it, not sending your resources down to fly kids who've already crossed the border out of Texas into other states, into other places where they're being held. You can see by the way the left is choosing to spend their money what their goal is. It is not to stop this influx. It is not to secure the border. And it is, in my view, in this whole immigration discussion, the best stand for American people to say would be no changes to immigration law until the border is secure.
That's right.
Period. Because once they get that message, then we're done talking about all the other ideas that the left comes up with.
I will say that I do think that this phenomenon will actually serve to prevent us from passing immigration reform this year. Two things that happened this week: that coming into the news, and also the Cantor defeat. I think they're not going to want to touch it.
Very interesting. Let me add one more thing just before we take a break to the conversation, because Marcella in Texas, KNLB, I think you have something you want to share with us as well. So go for it.
Yes. Hold on for a second. Okay. The Spanish media for several weeks, they were announcing an activist, and she's very liberal, Elvira Arellano is her name. She was deported because she was here illegally, and she didn't use false identity. She found refuge in a church and stayed there for months.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, but I think what she was going to talk about is that there are Spanish media right now, stations and others, that have been telling people that they can cross the border. And we didn't have a very good line there. So we already, of course, have evidence that in some of the embassies there was discussion about the fact that indeed, if your children make it to America, they will not be deported. And they're seeing this with the idea of chain migration. Unfortunately, we didn't have a very good phone call there, but Marcel was just talking about how some of the Spanish stations have been even announcing that if you cross the border, your children will be safe. And that's like getting the gold ticket with Willy Wonka's golden ticket. In this case, it's the golden ticket of being an American citizen, or at least being in the United States of America.
There was a law passed called the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Program, and I think that news may be out there in the world, the notion we've somehow passed a law that says if you're a child here, we won't deport you, we'll keep you forever. But that law, that DACA law, only applies to kids coming to America who came to America prior to June of 2007. Right. Right. And Senator McCain's been saying, President Obama, you need to be saying this out loud. This is the law of the land. But there's silence from this administration.
Well, that's exactly why. And, of course, you saw that counterpoint in the video that we had with Ted Cruz. And I understand that the Secretary of Homeland Security explaining that this is not amnesty and this is not what this is creating, but it's miscommunicated. And if indeed you are in Mexico or Honduras, El Salvador, Costa Rica, whatever, and you want to get American citizenship and you're willing to send your babies across the border, that's amazing. Some of you want to speak to that issue. We'll take some more of your phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
Father's Day prompts us to think about our dads and the ways they've made us who we are. An involved father provides his children with a crucial foundation for success in life. We know boys without a father influence have huge obstacles to overcome, but there's some recent research showing the important ways in which fathers affect the lives of their young adult daughters. First, and not surprisingly, daughters with dads who encourage them to achieve do. Linda Nielsen, professor of educational and adolescent psychology at Wake Forest University, writes, daughters whose fathers have been actively engaged throughout childhood in promoting their academic or athletic achievements and encouraging their self-reliance and assertiveness are more likely to graduate from college and to enter the higher-paying, more demanding jobs traditionally held by males. And much more than in earlier generations, girls actually follow in their father's career footsteps. According to Professor Nielsen, women who were born in the 1970s are 3 times more likely than those born at the beginning of the 20th century to work in the same field as their fathers. Part of this is due to changes in gender roles, but researchers also attribute this finding to the fact that the current generation of young adult women received more mentoring from their fathers. In a daughter's romantic life, the father is extremely influential. Professor Nielsen reports, quote, the well-fathered daughter is also the most likely to have relationships with men that are emotionally intimate and fulfilling. She is more likely to have strong emotional communication with young men and less likely to be talked into having sex. The odds are she'll have a more satisfying and longer-lasting marriage. Fathers have more impact on their daughters' relationships with men than their mothers do. This is true even though daughters normally talk more and more frankly with their mothers. In his book, Bringing Up Girls, Dr. James Dobson addresses the crucial space a father occupies in his daughter's life and heart, saying that if a father rejects, ignores, abuses, or in some way abandons his daughter, her yearning for that father role to be filled in her life becomes more intense. He writes, mothers cannot fill this particular empty space. Dr. Dobson says that girls need their fathers as much as boys do. However, he's noticed an interesting phenomenon that occurs even in intact families. Daughters tend to be third in line for the attention of the man in the family. He elaborates, fathers know intuitively that their boys require special attention, discipline, and leadership, but they are often unaware of how desperately their daughters need them. We expect Dr. Dobson to have some fixes for this, and he does. 1, lots of father-daughter conversation. 2, lots of hugs, even and occasionally when daughters hit their teen years. 3, one-on-one time together, just dad and his girl. Dads, you are a treasure. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Those of you that listen online just heard Penna Dexter's commentary. We'll hear it again a little bit later. We'll get into that because, after all, we're just getting really close to Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
We won't forget about that, but let's stay on immigration for a little bit longer, but we will get into Penna's commentary. It is under the Point of View blog section, so you can find it there. And, of course, you can find many of the links that we're talking about today. First web link is to Concerned Women for America, and that's a way in which people can maybe even start a new chapter here. We got 2 CWA members, at least, that I know of. And then Ladies Can We Talk? We have that link as well. We have the book and all sorts of other resources. But let's take a phone call again on this issue of immigration. And Ron, KCTA in Texas. Ron, thank you for calling today.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, this is a really important subject. You know, if Americans did to their children what they're doing to these kids that are coming across the border, we'd be going to jail for neglect, for abandonment, abuse, everything you can imagine. What about the kids that are coming across the desert? I can't understand how parents can do that. Why are we treated as second-class citizens in the world where we go to jail for something we should, and they get a free pass? As soon as they enter Texas to claim their kids, they ought to immediately be arrested and go to jail for what they've done to their kids. Now, the solution, or one of the solutions, is put some of that housing right on the border. They can claim them there if they want. And those that don't get claimed, adopt them out as fast as possible. Once they're adopted, the parents have lost them forever, and that's the way it ought to be. I can't imagine sending my own kid out into a desert or into another country.
I can't either. Let me go around the table, because if this is one thing that strikes a mother's heart, can you imagine, what it takes these days for a mother to send a child out the home? I mean, I grew up at a time, I guess I'm the oldest one around the table, where, I took off and my parents didn't know where I was for hours. Yep. If you don't know where your children or grandchildren are now, boy, you are panicked. And just, can you imagine, Michelle, what it takes and the desperation it takes for a mother to say, I'm going to put that child in the hands of somebody that I'm not even sure I trust, or to pull up close to the border and send them off and hope that everything turns out okay for them?
Well, I have 3 children, one daughter that's 19 and a boy that's 15 and 14, and myself just coming back from a foreign country who happened to be with people who could speak the language. Can you imagine a 19-year-old daughter who you may be sending across, who may be not going exactly where you think they're going? Maybe they're going into sex trafficking. Maybe they're going to a life that is disgusted, and they don't even understand the language. I just can't. This is just unfathomable what's happening to these children.
Well, it's a failure, though, of our leadership. I mean, I'm upset that people are doing this. They must be doing it out of desperation or not being very well informed about what it's like there at the border and what can happen. But that our leadership is allowing this to happen. And, we mentioned earlier the fact that there was this law where young people who were brought here before 2007 by their parents, and it's through no fault of their own. That's the whole thing that everyone keeps saying. They could be getting amnesty. Well, it's not really a law. It was an executive order by President Obama that took 800,000 people and actually gave them amnesty. And it was a unilateral decision done by the administration. Congress didn't pass that. The American people did not say they wanted that. And so, that is what these kids don't qualify for that, but they're coming in under that, as Ted Cruz mentioned. It's a policy that we have that is now being opened up to allow this horrible atrocity.
Mm-hmm.
Debbie, let me come to you, because one of the things you sent to me a while back here was President Obama saying, our future rests on the success of dream kids. And so at a time when it would be helpful for the president to actually clarify that if you cross the border, you're not going to be one of those individuals that qualifies as a dream kid, instead of clarifying it, he actually says the future of America depends on these dream kids. That's about the worst message you could send right now in the midst of this humanitarian crisis. Am I missing something?
No, I don't think you're missing anything at all. I do think the entire issue of immigration and these children coming over the border, it is an exploitation of children, an exploitation of the American people. It's an emotional manipulation. Of course, all the moms sitting here at this table and listening to your show have the same reaction. We barely let our kids visit a friend's house until we knew the mom, made sure the mom was home, okay with the family. And so there is as a panicked mom, a desperate mom who would send their kids over the border. But we have created in our country the notion that immigration should be resolved on emotional bases rather than on what's good for the country, what's good for the rule of law, what kind of future are we creating in America if we don't honor the law. And that is what President Obama is doing, is trying to stir up emotion and encourage people to ignore rationality, ignore law, ignore fact, and just be emotional. And the DREAM Act thing, he's talking about the future of America belongs to the DREAM Act kids. What about the American kids that we're not doing a good enough job educating? And if we flood our schools and communities with people who don't have a grounding in America's goodness and greatness, we're hurting America's culture. We're hurting America's future.
No, certainly agree. Let's, if we can, also give some of you a chance to join our conversation today. 1-800-351-1212. We'll head to Alabama and talk to Robert. What would you like to share with us today?
I'd just like to share that it's been a proven fact, even that Saudi Arabia was the one that was behind bombing that our towers up yonder. But George Bush and his buddies went against Iraq because they made millions of dollars off of it.
Well,
Iraq didn't have nothing to do with it. And Saudi Arabia, and you can follow the money, is giving those Mexican parents down there hundreds of thousands of dollars to send kids across the border.
Well, I don't think I agree with that, but again, you give me some facts, I'm always willing to look for it. But let's take even the grain of truth in that. There are some of these young people that are crossing this border, and they're listed as OTMs. What does that mean? That means other than Mexican, okay? Now, that could mean Costa Rica, El Salvador, Honduras, but every once in a while when we look at some of those people that are OTMs, and we look in their backpacks, we realize that they speak Arabic and they've come from other countries. And so when you have a porous border, it is quite possible, of course, to have individuals that will use that for nefarious reasons. And I don't want to suggest that a high percentage of those young people or even adults that are coming across the border mean us harm. They're just coming to try to gain the American experience. But what about the possible dangers of people crossing our border and then using that later to link up with a terrorist network or something of that nature?
It's one of the strongest reasons to secure the border. I think a lot of the border discussion centers around sympathy for families who are poor, families who don't have anywhere to go, and they're coming to America to find their way, to work hard and support themselves. And it's a sympathetic picture. But actually, the border does have problems with people, OTMs, literally being people from countries that are house Islamic jihadists. There was actually discussion last year about several jihadist groups using a country in South America as a springboard, locating there and then sending people over our border. And this is the fundamental job of the United States government, the fundamental job to protect America's well-being, to protect our national security. And that's why the border issue is not a sympathetic children's issue alone. It is a national security issue, and both parties, I agree with whoever said earlier, both parties have not done a good job, but it is job number one, and we are letting people in who do and will mean us harm. If we don't secure the border, it's inevitable.
Well, again, we have the government doing a lot of things that constitutionally it was never intended to do in the first place. But there is one thing that I think most of us would agree, and that is government is to protect the borders and protect the citizens. And from a biblical point of view, Romans 13, 1-7 talks about the fact that government bears the sword. In the second hour, we're going to talk about the sword that we've used when we've gone overseas to fight terrorism. But the other sword is the sword to protect us from individuals who would come into this country who mean us harm. And so if there's anything that the government should be involved with, it is this issue of protecting us at the border. And when we come back, we'll talk about what is happening in Iraq. The amount of blood and treasure and time that is spent there and what is unfolding now with the jihadists. We were assured in the last campaign that the war of terrorism was winding down. Osama bin Laden is gone, but unfortunately this particular group, ISIS, it didn't get the memo. And so we are seeing various jihadists marching towards Baghdad. So we'll talk about that in the second hour. But just before we take a break, again, I've mentioned the fact that we are in the midst of a campaign and an opportunity for you to participate with us financially. And so please, if you would, visit the website, pointofview.net. Click on that button that says double your donation now. This is a great opportunity for you to support this ministry. We'll take a break and continue our roundtable discussion right after this.
Across the nation, this is Point of View. For materials offered during the broadcast, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
I can't stop thinking about you. Jesus, I love you, how I adore you. I can't stop thinking about you.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Just privileged around the round table here to have Penna Dexter, Debbie Georgatos, as well as Michelle Smith. And if you would like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let's take another phone call, and then we're going to get into some other topics, but one left over from the last hour as we talk about immigration. And Susan in Georgia, listening on WGNN. Susan, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. My comment is this: in light of all these things that our president is allowing and doing in our nation, why in the world have we the people, not had this president impeached? I mean, he is doing so many anti-American, anti-God Christian things that just blows my mind.
Well, you set up a question that we were sort of talking about off the air. Let me just mention that we probably will have Andrew McCarthy on, because his argument in his latest book is that there are a lot of things that the president has done that would merit impeachment. And Penna, you know that if Kelly Shackelford were here right now, he'd say, yeah, I was one of the first ones to raise that issue back when he would not enforce the Defense of Marriage Act. Well, since then, we have all sorts of executive orders. Andrew McCarthy argues simply just in terms of foreign policy, when you unilaterally decide to take 5 killers from the Taliban in Gitmo and trade them for an American who might have been a deserter, although I suspect he was, but I'll just keep it as might for the moment, and you specifically violate a law that said that you were to give 30 days notice to Congress, and you couldn't even talk to somebody in your own party, Dianne Feinstein, head of the Intelligence Committee. It seems to me that those could be impeachable offenses. Now, I think there'd be a terrible backlash if that happened, but Penna, let me come to you. This is something we've talked about before with you and Kelly Shackelford.
We also talked about it back in the 90s when Bill Clinton was president.
Yeah.
And, you know, we watched all of this unfold, and I think the Republicans are very gun-shy about impeachment because
Yes.
it hurt them that time. And so they're not willing to move forward on it. We're pretty far into the presidency. A lot of people say, well, we lose an electional issue if we get off on the impeachment track. And so there's just a lot of reasons it doesn't happen. I think sometimes what happens is people pull that card so early in someone's presidency when they lost the election, their guy lost, this person won, and you want to impeach them immediately, and that just pulls all credibility out of it. But this president has done so many impeachable things in office that, you know, if anyone deserved it, it's him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we'll do it, though.
Okay, Debbie, I got to come to you. I went to Georgetown. You went to Georgetown Law. One of the things we learned in terms of the Constitution is the framers did put a check in the Constitution a check on the executive branch, and it was impeachment. Because we haven't used it, it's sort of fallen out of favor. But I think the framers really intended that we would be able to remove people from office, just as today in a parliamentary sitting, well, in almost all parliamentary situations, you have what's called a vote of no confidence to remove a person from office. We don't really have that tradition of impeachment, but it's certainly one of the things that the framers intended.
They most certainly did. You know, just to be clear to all the listeners, impeachment is described in the Constitution. It's in Article 2, Section 4. It says the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And it's intended to be a high standard, but I would agree with Penna that many things President Obama has done certainly fall in the category of high crimes. This releasing of the Taliban 5, I actually can see the argument that's treasonous. You are releasing enemies of our state in a time of war, and you're releasing people you know are dedicated to wanting to kill Americans. And so I don't know what other label to put on it, but that's kind of the legal angle, and I think it is. I think the things he's done extra constitutionally, also the use of executive orders, is so extreme, and so he did it in Obamacare, but many other laws where he just changes the law because he refuses to enforce it. He's not following the Constitution. So I have to say that's the legal level, but on the practical level, my assessment would be that the Republicans will not want to take action on that because they fear so much backlash because it's a first sitting black president, and much of what we describe, we who pay attention to politics, as wrongdoing doesn't resonate with the average American. I think that's the fear Republicans would have, is people won't see what was so wrong. Now, I will say, if he actually tries something like an executive order to blanket amnesty or something that everyone, the common person, can say, wow, you can't do that. Maybe then they'd revisit that issue. But it's a political hot potato, and I think most people will stay away from it.
You know, I totally agree with what she just said, but let me just say, take it one step further. Not only is what you've just described as could be impeachable, he has put our country in serious jeopardy. I mean, what he has said to anybody over there, just kidnap American soldiers and we will release 5 of yours, 1 to 5. Let's just do it like that. I think that the judicial process, something should pick up, and we should start calling him for what's happening here. This is a real serious crime.
The other legal action I wish would occur if there is no impeachment proceeding, which I really don't think there will be, is to have more challenges in court on the executive orders.
Could be, yeah.
To have Congress go after some of those orders that are clearly impermissible beyond the scope of his power as president.
Again, if you want to join our conversation on these topics, we certainly have much to talk about, but I want to move on at least to one more, and that is sort of being implied when we talked about the release of those 5 Taliban killers. And that is, first of all, Penna, we've talked about this before. Is this the going rate? You know, we release 5 Taliban killers for 1 American. And when I was talking earlier this week with Frank Gaffney, who was in studio with us, he said, well, I hope it's not the going rate, because the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and this new group, ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Al-Sham, which is the one that's marching towards Baghdad, could say, well, okay, let's just do the calculation. How many more people we want to get out of Guantanamo? 5 times whatever. We'll take that many prisoners, that many hostages, and we'll empty out Guantanamo. This is a concern about what is happening nationwide and worldwide, as I think many of the radicals, especially the jihadists, perceive us as being a weak nation.
Yeah, and I'm not sure whether this is a sign of this president's just tone deafness, weakness, incompetence, or if this is a purposeful just weakening of our foreign policy, just removing the leverage that we have across the world, because we certainly don't. And that's playing out in so many other ways. But this was scary to see him then go to the Rose Garden and start talking about this as some sort of thing to celebrate that we have. And then, did they not know or think that this guy's background would be released very, very quickly?
This was one that still has even Republicans and Democrats shaking their heads saying, you thought this was going to be a victory dance, and it has been a disaster from start to finish. So we'll continue talking about that, but also I want to get into what is happening in Iraq. Would love to hear from some of you that serve with distinction in our military. What are you thinking about now when we see this group called ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, actually taking back those cities that we took, Mosul, Tikrit, Fallujah. Remember the house-to-house battles to take Fallujah. And when George W. Bush left office and when Barack Obama came in, peace was in Iraq. Not any longer. We'll be right back.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Does a solar eclipse provide evidence of intelligent design? That is what first got astronomer Guillermo Gonzalez thinking as he watched a total eclipse in India in 1995. In order to have a solar eclipse, you need to have an object come in front of the sun. Essentially, you could watch a partial solar eclipse on any planet in our solar system that has a moon, but Earth is the only planet where a total solar eclipse can be seen. As I point out in my book, A Biblical Point of View on Intelligent Design, the unique experience of a solar eclipse on planet Earth appears to be more than just coincidence. There are a number of reasons why only the Earth can have a total solar eclipse. Our moon is 1/400th the size of the sun, and the sun is 400 times away from the Earth and from the moon. Therefore, when the moon comes between the sun and the Earth, a small area of the Earth experiences a total solar eclipse in which the sun is fully blocked out by the moon. Now, the scientific benefit of a total solar eclipse is significant. Because the moon blocks out the sun, scientists have the ability to see and measure the sun's corona. Normally, the sun is too bright for us to see the corona, but a total solar eclipse allows scientists to measure the light spectrum of the corona, and much of what we know today about stars comes from this measurement. The fact that our Earth experiences a total solar eclipse of the sun makes our planet unique in the solar system, probably unique among many other solar systems. Add to this many other factors, such as the fact that our moon is the right size, shape, and orbit for human life. The moon provides the gravitational balance between the Earth and it and provides us with diurnal tides. You could accurately say that the moon makes life here on Earth possible. Those are just a few reasons why many scientists see intelligent design in our moon and even in a solar eclipse. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let me open up the phones again to give some of you a chance to join our conversation, because as we are seeing this jihadist group begin to take back some of those cities that were hard fought and won by American troops, as well as others, Canadians, British, and others, we now see those various cities fall. Mosul, Tikrit, Fallujah. Will Baghdad be the next? And it's certainly a great concern. Love to hear from some of you that actually were involved in the military fight. Your thoughts about that. And let's go around the round table. 1-800-351-1212. Penna Dexter, what's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, this is a result of our failures in foreign policy, and it's another failure of foreign policy that's taking place right now. And the statements that come out of the Obama administration indicate that it's really more an observer than a player in this right now. That could change. And we might, there might be things in the works right now that are going to be a change, but that's what we see. And that doesn't make most of us who, watch the sacrifices we made during the war on terror.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, we want calls from people in the military to talk about, especially if they served in Iraq, what's going on now. We've wasted a lot of time and treasure. He wasted it immediately when he came into office, and now the results are coming to roost. But in Iraq, of course, we spent our time and treasure, and now we've got the Sunni sort of group of Al Qaeda that are moving forward. These people have taken over these Iraqi cities, and they're vowing to take Baghdad, and they are publicly vowing to attack the U.S. homeland. We need not forget that. The troops then are abandoning the equipment that we've given them, and it's going over to the enemy. I mean, that's one thing we have done is give equipment to the leadership in Iraq, but we just have bad leadership there. We've supported Maliki, who actually isn't supported by the people, but we've sort of propped him up too, and he's been he's been part of this issue. But when you hear some of the words coming out of our administration, they don't really give you a lot of confidence that we're on the task, that we've got their back. Like we're closely focused, we're watching it very carefully. We have this counterterrorism partnership fund that's going to be part of the solution here. We're giving humanitarian assistance, which is certainly important, but we need to be doing a lot more than that.
I think so. Debbie?
I know America is war weary, and you certainly hear that term often, that we just have had a long, dragged out war. But I think stepping back from the immediacy of this situation, the biggest threat to the future of liberty, of Christian-based society in the Western civilization is radical Islam. And so we have to view all these issues from that perspective. That is the biggest threat to us. And so every chance we have to send a message to any jihadist group in any country of the world that we are going to hold them back is a national security interest. I think some people look at Iraq and they say it's terrible and it's sad and I'm sorry these people are suffering, but it's really not our problem. But if we don't stand up to radical Islam when we can have a reasonable opportunity to do that, we are hurting our future security. These groups, as Penna mentioned, this particular one in Iraq, they do view America as the enemy, the ultimate big enemy. And, I know people also ask, well, what could we have done differently? We fought, we lost, I believe it's 4,000 American troops in the war just in Iraq. But toward the close of that war, when President Obama chose to pull our troops out, one choice he had, and it was suggested to him and he wouldn't do, was something like, they call it a status of forces agreement with Baghdad, but it would an agreement to say we are going to leave some of our strong enough troops in place, Apache helicopters, Predator drones, attack planes, and a significant enough U.S. military presence that rebels would not be willing to fight as they are now. But we left a very small contingent there. We basically left, and this is what happens. This is the jihadists figuring, hey, Americans are gone and we're on our own. And this is a direct national security interest of America to keep that country and that portion of the world, the jihadists there, afraid of us.
Well, and certainly there's a possibility of an Islamic caliphate that could run all the way from Tunisia through Egypt on the way down to Afghanistan. And so that is another real big concern about what that might be. I also office with a ministry that has been building an outreach center there in Baghdad. They're a different ministry than ours, but I office with them. And they're having to pull some of the people out right now because one of the real hopes, I think, for a country like Iraq is that you lead more people to Christ and have a Christian presence. But right now, a lot of people are ready to leave, including a lot of the missionaries. Michelle?
Well, Kerby, I'll just say this. There's an article that was written in Town Hall that you'd sent to us from Mark Davis, and I will say that it was pretty eye-opening to read. And one of the things he said, so here it is. How will it work out for us to see Baghdad fall? How will it feel as we see forces of evil overturn the turf our sons and daughters fought and died on? What will fill the remaining years of the presidency that has kept its promise to end the war that is in no way ending in terms of the enemy's aggression towards us? When we think about how many soldiers, as she said, 4,000 have died, And now everything we worked for that blood is totally being destroyed. It is just, it's unspeakable. I don't even know what to say about it.
Let's take a phone call real quickly. John in New Mexico, I think, wants to pick up on that. So, John, what would you share with us today?
I agree with what you just said. Just the fact that thousands of lives have been lost in this battle over 8 years that was spent, and billions of dollars, not to mention how many lives it affected us here in America and other countries. And just because of the policies and decisions that our president and leadership are making right now, that essentially it's being lost in a matter of days.
I think it's fair to say that actually when Mr. Obama came into office, this comes from the Wall Street Journal, Iraq was largely at peace. And reporters had talked about the fact that some of the worst days of the insurgency were gone. And we might remember some of the various comments being made. And one particular news outlet put together some of the clips of the spiking the ball comments that came from President Obama, Vice President Biden. And I posted it on my personal Facebook because what I thought was interesting is they compared it to this football player that, I won't get into his name, had this tendency that as he was running to the end zone, he would always spike the football, but lots of times he'd spike the football before he got into the end zone. And the implication is that the administration spiked the ball a little bit too soon. And when you look at all the comments, especially during the election, and the suggestion that, for example, his opponent, Mitt Romney, saying, I don't think it's a good idea to be pulling these troops out, and all the ridicule that came. Well, now we see the consequences of some of those policy decisions that came back then.
Yeah, do you think they'll learn this lesson for Afghanistan? Probably not.
I'm afraid that there is a war-weary American people, and there is a president that is convinced that we need to disengage, and there is sort of a quasi-isolationist mentality that Gary Bauer and I have been talking about this. It isn't just that people are weary of war. It's a second point that Gary Bauer pointed out, and again, we're going to play this in the future. He says it's also due to the fact that a lot of people just don't believe that the president will do what he says. Mm-hmm. We around the table had questions about, well, even if we had legislation that required us to secure the border, even if we did say that we are going to spend this money for any kind of military action, and right now they're just talking about air bombing or something of that nature, but nevertheless, there are just a lot of people that aren't necessarily trusting of the commander-in-chief, and so that's another reason for this isolationist mentality right now.
I agree so strongly. I really think there's a void in American leadership in terms of someone standing up and helping for the American people to connect the dots between violence we read about in Iraq and America's future security, because people don't want to waste our treasure and our precious young lives in the military for causes they can't see ultimately can have a positive outcome, or that they can't see the America's interests. But I guess I'm repeating myself, but what's happening in Iraq is ultimately directly will impact America's interests. And there's just, the other thing is, this current president, this is the most pro-Islamic presidents we've ever had, someone who is sympathetic to and understanding of Islam and not willing to identify as a source of danger to America.
Let's take a break real quickly. I want to get back and get some more of your comments around the table, but we're coming to one of those breaks. But we also, when we come back, might want to also talk about what it's like for those who are in these Muslim countries. I'm thinking of Pastor Saeed, who is in Iran. I'm thinking of Miriam Ibrahim and a piece of concern that is surfaced about her future in Sudan. Sudan is whether or not she would eventually be receiving 100 lashes, eventually executed. Where is the administration on those issues, and what about the silence in that regard? Some of you have been to Israel. I'd like to talk about the issue of Israel and what this means for them. And before we're done, we certainly do recognize it's Father's Day this weekend, so we'll talk about fathers and their daughters. Penna's done a great commentary. We'll get into those issues as well. So if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Roundtable discussion today, and don't forget that we are encouraging you to go to our website. You can watch the video, for example, with Ted Cruz. You can read some of the articles. You can find the web links to some of the ministries we've talked about today, but you can also click on that button
It gives you a chance to double your donations, and we certainly do need to hear from you between now and the end of the month. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
In a half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, we have a round table of guests, and it is weekend edition, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to Mark in Pennsylvania. Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Kerby. How you doing?
I'm very good.
Good, good. And my question or comment has to do with two things. And first thing is, how is this going to affect the cost of oil in this country, in Iraq, and what does that pursue the nation of doing is in drilling here
Sure.
itself. And then my other comment is on the border. You know, if it's so easy to have these immigrants coming in, like the border is letting them, what's going to stop these terrorists from coming in?
Yeah, well, that's the question I put on the table,
And just like our, the 5 that we let go. I just kind of wondered what you guys' thoughts were on that.
Very good. Let me take the price one first, and we'll talk about terrorism. First of all, the price of oil is probably going to go up anyway because it's the summer months. It's probably going to go up more because of the hesitation of what is happening in Iraq, because after all, a lot of the prices have to do with oil futures. We'll get into all the technical market there. Now, it doesn't necessarily affect us because, interestingly enough, we were talking about the Prime Minister Maliki. He never gave us 1 barrel of oil. It seems to me that we could have made the argument that if we're going to send so much treasure and so many lives lost, that the very least we could get is some of the Iraqi oil when it went back online. Now, there were some reasons why that didn't happen. One of it was the oil companies didn't want to flood the market there because then their price wouldn't be stable. So basically, if you want to follow the money, Iraq sold those barrels of oil to China. So China probably benefited as much from our military and action. But I think the reasonable prediction is the price of oil will go up. How much? I don't know. I'll leave that to the speculators. But if these speculators are really concerned that this group ISIS actually is going to be dangerous and it is going to bring down the infrastructure in Baghdad and around Iraq, whoa. I mean, we may be paying a lot more for gas. What about the possibility of terrorists crossing our border? Any thoughts?
Should be one of our biggest concerns. Yes, you're absolutely right. If the border is porous and no one's checking every person and finding out where they're from and why they're coming, if I were a terrorist in any Middle Eastern country, I would think, wow, that's just an easy way to get into the U.S. It's just been I don't have numbers, so I won't try to estimate, but there were numbers reported last year for the percentage of people crossing the border who were OTM, other than Mexican, and some from countries that are Muslim. And so that's definitely what's already occurring at the border. We aren't protecting it. We aren't even figuring out who it is who's coming in.
You know what amazes me is the fact that we go through so much at airports when we travel for security because we're in a quote unquote war on terror.
Yeah.
In our airports, that's very apparent. But at our borders, it's not apparent. And
No.
now with our military policy across the Middle East, it's not.
Incredible. I'll get to some more phone calls in just a minute, but I did mention that this is a president that I think does deserve some credit because he said he did not want to leave any individual in uniform, man or woman, left on the battlefield. Whether or not that individual took the uniform off and went to the other side, we'll leave to another day. But we do seem to be leaving some people behind because we have Pastor Saeed, who is in Iran. He's an American citizen. We have Miriam Ibrahim, and here is a woman who is married to an American citizen. And if you look at Pastor Saeed, and his wife has been trying to make the case that we need to bring pressure to get him out of Iran, or the rally that was the other day where you had everybody from Tony Perkins to Senator Ted Cruz talking about the president needs to break his silence and speak out about this woman in Sudan who will be executed simply because she's become a Christian.
Well, my CEO, Penny Nance, was there with Senator
Yes,
Cruz
she was
this
too.
week.
I saw
Yes.
that. Yeah.
And, we have so many issues this is a religious liberty issue. This is a U.S. citizen's wife that is being persecuted. We also have a situation, Kerby, with the the young girls that are not home yet. We have no answer for that. We have no answer for Benghazi. I mean, we have no answer for so many things this president is remaining silent on, and these are serious issues.
Yeah, Marine in Mexico. You can go on and on. I mean, the silence here, Penna, is really striking to me. There seems to be some place where you would think that the president would at least say enough to pass the straight face test.
Why would it even be controversial? Why would not he stand up for these people? You know, one other thing that, having to do with Christians in these countries. I mean, in Iraq, we've already talked about many times the exodus of Christians from Iraq. And now apparently the city of Mosul was one area where Christians would flee to.
Yes.
And now that city's gone. They can't go there. Also in Syria. I mean, there's nowhere safe for Christians in Syria, basically. So, you know, Christians in the Middle East are at risk. They're in huge, huge danger. A lot of our groups like Open Doors are telling us that the situation is just very scary for them. And so, you know, this area of the world where we had churches, where the early church was, you know, thrived in parts of these countries, now is just not a safe place for them.
Debbie, any comments?
Just that, you know, we had a negotiation not too long ago with Iran, and it was centered around the nuclear stuff, but when we have a high-level negotiation and an American being held there, why wouldn't that be your opening salvo? Before we give you any money, before anything further happens, give our guy back, and then we're going to talk. We had times when we had leverage, and it speaks of the disregard our administration seems to have for cases like this, because it wasn't even brought up that I ever read. Not even brought up.
Well, and when it is brought up, let's use this example. There are nations in the Caribbean and nations in Africa, and I know this for a fact, that were threatened by the American government, by the federal government, by the Obama administration, that we will withhold federal aid to you if you do not accept same-sex marriage, if you do not change your rules on homosexuality. So there is one place where this president and this administration has used the leverage of foreign aid. And I'm the first to say I'm not so sure we should be sending foreign aid to a lot of those countries. I will to Israel, but maybe not too many of these others. But okay, if you're going to use the leverage of foreign aid, the one time we seem to have used it, Penna Dexter, is what?
Yeah, to advance the radical homosexual agenda. Well, we've done it to some degree with the life issue also, with loosening of abortion laws. But, you know, China's another country where we trade with them, we have all kinds of relationships with them, but we don't stand up for the human rights of folks there either.
What about this human rights issue? Because we've mentioned Open Doors. We could talk about Voice of the Martyrs. There is something that we as Christians can and should do, and it maybe is best illustrated by a friend of this ministry's, Dennis Prager. He said, you know, when he was a young Jewish boy, he would travel around and speak out for the plight of Soviet Jews. And early on, even long before he became a talk show host, he used to say, where are the Christians? I mean, I'm out here speaking for the Jews behind the Iron Curtain, speaking for the Jews in Russia, the Sharanskys and others like that. But there wasn't any of this in the churches. And even to this day, we as Christians probably could do a lot more to speak these names. I'm sure that when I said the name Miriam Ibrahim, I would bet maybe 80 or 90% of the listeners go, who? Even though we've had some rallies, and I will give credit where credit is due. We've mentioned Penny Nance, we mentioned Tony Perkins, and of course you have Senator Ted Cruz and others that have been in a long, long list of individuals. But I would still imagine that most of the individuals in church, even this Sunday, will never hear a pastor even mention the fact that there are Christians being persecuted, highly visible Christians that are being persecuted. And if nothing else, we should be praying for those individuals.
Well, Kerby, I just have to mention briefly that I just came back last Wednesday from a 9-day stint in Israel, and we actually met with a Palestinian Arab Christian who actually lives in Bethlehem and is a supporter to stand with Israel. I'll admit, as a Christian leader, as a leader of an organization, that this is what we do. We stand with Israel. I was ignorant to the fact of what was really happening until I was over there and actually got to see on the front lines and experience this myself. And the Jews, the persecution that they face every single day. I went to the Wailing Wall on Jerusalem Day, and I couldn't believe what was coming from the top, rocks being thrown down on the Jewish people, and Muslims screaming, "You should have died in Auschwitz." And this is every day the persecution they face in Israel. And what's happening in Iraq and what's happening in this whole entire region, I don't think Christian Americans, I mean, they think it's over there. It's over there, so it's not happening here. If you go over there and you spend any amount of time and you realize, I mean, I went to the Jordanian border, the Syrian border, we actually saw rebels, and you realize that in Israel specifically, these are 18-year-old children that are making decisions like with the Iron Dome that we as Americans helped to furnish over there where they shoot those missiles down. Mm-hmm. They're making decisions. We need to become more educated as Americans of what's happening, not only with what's happening in Sudan, what's happening with these pastors. We need to become more educated.
Well, that's what Point of View is all about. We're going to take a break and continue our conversation right after this.
Mario.
Father's Day prompts us to think about our dads and the ways they've made us who we are. An involved father provides his children with a crucial foundation for success in life. We know boys without a father influence have huge obstacles to overcome, but there's some recent research showing the important ways in which fathers affect the lives of their young adult daughters. First, and not surprisingly, daughters with dads who encourage them to achieve do. Linda Nielsen, professor of educational and adolescent psychology at Wake Forest University, writes, daughters whose fathers have been actively engaged throughout childhood in promoting their academic or athletic achievements and encouraging their self-reliance and assertiveness are more likely to graduate from college and to enter the higher-paying, more demanding jobs traditionally held by males. And much more than in earlier generations, girls actually follow in their father's career footsteps. According to Professor Nielsen, women who were born in the 1970s are 3 times more likely than those born at the beginning of the 20th century to work in the same field as their fathers. Part of this is due to changes in gender roles, but researchers also attribute this finding to the fact that the current generation of young adult women received more mentoring from their fathers. In a daughter's romantic life, the father is extremely influential. Professor Nielsen reports, quote, the well-fathered daughter is also the most likely to have relationships with men that are emotionally intimate and fulfilling. She is more likely to have strong emotional communication with young men and less likely to be talked into having sex. The odds are she'll have a more satisfying and longer-lasting marriage. Fathers have more impact on their daughters' relationships with men than their mothers do. This is true even though daughters normally talk more and more frankly with their mothers. In his book, Bringing Up Girls, Dr. James Dobson addresses the crucial space a father occupies in his daughter's life and heart, saying that if a father rejects, ignores, abuses, or in some way abandons his daughter, her yearning for that father role to be filled in her life becomes more intense. He writes, mothers cannot fill this particular empty space. Dr. Dobson says that girls need their fathers as much as boys do. However, he's noticed an interesting phenomenon that occurs even in intact families. Daughters tend to be third in line for the attention of the man in the family. He elaborates, fathers know intuitively that their boys require special attention, discipline, and leadership, but they are often unaware of how desperately their daughters need them. We expect Dr. Dobson to have some fixes for this, and he does. 1, lots of father-daughter conversation. 2, lots of hugs, even and occasionally when daughters hit their teen years. 3, one-on-one time together, just dad and his girl. Dads, you are a treasure. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
We're back for a few more minutes, but let me just, since we are, first of all, heading towards Father's Day on Sunday, and also since those of you that listen online or watch it actually have just heard the commentary by Penna Dexter, let's, if we can, for just a minute, talk about dads, because, Penna, you spent some time in this particular commentary talking about dads and daughters. You quote from our good friend Jim Dobson. You've been on that program and even hosted with him many times before and been having him on this program, but I think he has done a great service to remind us that this culture that we have here where dads are sort of optional, is not true, that fathers not only are important for their sons, fathers are also important for their daughters.
That's what was interesting about this, because we talk every Father's Day about our fathers. And it's funny how on Mother's Day we compliment our mothers, we bring them flowers, we praise them. And for fathers, it's more like because there's this fatherlessness phenomenon in the culture, we talk more about the public purpose of fathers. I think it's just a funny phenomenon. And I did this here again, but it was with girls, because it's just interesting how much fathers really do influence their daughters. And some of it is counterintuitive. But this one that from this psychologist, Linda Nielsen, she is from Wake Forest University. And she found that if you were born in the 70s, in the 1970s, you are 3 times more likely than people born in the generation before you to work in the same field as your fathers.
Yeah,
so this just shows that fathers are mentoring daughters, and daughters are following in their father's footsteps sometimes. And then the romantic life of the young woman. The father is very important there, and more important than the mother. And so, you know, Dr. Dobson weighs in heavily in his book, Bringing Up Girls, on this. And I had a lot of fun talking to him about this, because he gets this huge twinkle in his eye about his own daughter.
Yes.
And the girls at the Focus Institute. And one thing he did do when he would go and speak to the girls at this institute that Focus on the Family put on when he was there, and he would interview them, he found out through his questioning of these young women that were attending there how important the dads were, both for a positive and for negative influences on these girls. Dads, you're just extremely important. So thank you for doing your job.
Well, again, we oftentimes focus on the fathers and the sons, because I've said this before, that a boy learns to be a man by being around other men. And at a time when there aren't a lot of men, not many men are teaching in elementary school. Sadly, we don't oftentimes have a lot of men teaching Sunday school classes in churches. It's kind of difficult. So we sort of see that a woman can only do so much to help a man our young boy figure out what it means to be a man. So we sort of get that, and we certainly recognize that a lot of young men have had to do that without a father present. But as you said, it's counterintuitive. A lot of people say, well, what impact does a father have on a daughter? Because after all, the daughter's usually closer to the mother's. But oftentimes the young girl perceives herself through her daddy's eyes. And if indeed he accepts her, it seems that she is less likely to be promiscuous, less likely to look for other kind of male approval. So the dads have a lot more influence than we might have thought.
Yeah, and one of the things Dr. Dobson said was even the physical contact between dads and daughters. Sometimes dads, when the girls hit puberty, the dads are a little scared with all the, you know, the hugging they've had with the little girl. Now we don't. Well, don't stop.
Yes.
Keep hugging her. Keep giving her affirmation. Keep giving her those pats and those hugs, and that relationship will serve her well in young adulthood.
Debbie, let's talk about that, because, again, we have this kind of cultural message that dads are optional, and I think we are recognizing how important a mother and a father are.
We most certainly are. You know, I don't have statistics in front of me, but the children growing up with just a mom in the home have a much harder time in life. And even moms who love their kids and try to be attentive, kids growing up without a dad in the home tend to have more problems in terms of staying in school, doing well, succeeding, all sorts of things. And on a personal note, having a dad who is attentive and everything Penna is saying just resonates as true. I haven't read that book, but now I'm going to. It really resonates as true. Having a dad being attentive and supportive and loving is really helpful. It's also great for young girls to watch a relationship that's premised on the right ideas, to watch their dad and their mom interact, and the support and the love and encouragement. There's just no replacement for that. You can't teach it in a class or tell someone in a lecture, but observing it year by year by year really helps young girls see what love, true love, should be like.
Yes. Michelle, any comments? You have same kind of comments, I suspect.
I totally am in agreement with that. And a dad does teach a daughter what to look for in a husband. There's no question.
I think there's a spiritual implication as well. Dr. Paul Vitz wrote a book years ago in which he was pointing out that many of the prominent atheists in the 19th and 20th century had very poor relationships to a father, either an absent father or a defective father. And oftentimes, if you don't have respect for your earthly father, you don't have respect for your heavenly father. Then he went back and looked at those individuals, the Wilberforces and others that were so profoundly influenced, and they either had a father or a father surrogate. And so it was kind of interesting to see that there's sort of a spiritual dimension to fatherhood as well.
You know, when Debbie was talking, I don't know anything about her dad, but it seemed like she probably had a really great dad.
Yeah.
And because she just was smiling. And I feel the same. And I just, I want to thank the Lord for
and I know
my
your
dad.
Yes. I've gone fishing with your dad, so I think really highly
and
of
you're
your
a great dad, Kerby.
Yeah.
I've watched you as a dad. I've known you a long time and raised wonderful children. And, for me, my husband raised a wonderful daughter and has been a great dad to our kids. And now, just in a week or so, that one daughter that I have is actually getting married to a wonderful young man.
Isn't that wonderful?
So it's fun to see that. And the dads, I think, who your daughter picks as someone to marry. It may not be exactly like her dad, but your dad, as a dad, you're really going to influence that choice too.
Well, fathers, we certainly want to emphasize your importance, and mothers out there and daughters, you can certainly say a great deal about your own father. Let me go around the round table. We're almost out of time, but one of the things that we have done today is provide some links, and one of those is at Concerned Women for America. And Michelle, last time we had you on, I think even had somebody say, hey, I'd like to start a new chapter in Texas. Here, this is the national connection. So anybody listening, if they would want to start a CWA chapter, they can go to that website, can't they?
Yes, Kerby, we did, and thank you for that. We Concerned Women for America is CWFA.org. We are the nation's largest public women's policy organization. We love our men too, our husbands and our dads. We do focus obviously on prayer, education, and action. If Satan can win in prayer, he can win anywhere. So we need our prayer warriors there, and we're in all 50 states, so you can find your state. I specifically direct Texas, but we have CWA. You can go to the website and look around in your state.
If they click on your bio, it'll take you to the Texas one. If they click on the general one, they will have that. We also have another website, and it's ladiescanwetalk.org. It's got a great picture of you, Debbie, and talk about what's available there, because I know you're available to go and speak on some of these topics we've been addressing today.
I so thank you very much. Yes, the name of my book is Ladies Can We Talk? America Needs Our Vote, and it is available on Amazon and on my website, ladiescanwetalk.org. And I had someone ask me recently, what do you talk about? It's kind of said, well, the title kind of says it all. I think America is a great place. There's a lot of issues that matter to America's future, and you need women to understand how America got so great, what made it great, why is it the leader in the world, and what can we do to preserve that? And so I constantly saying, speak up for America in your daily life, and every aspect, every quality, every tenet behind America, speak up for it and defend it in your daily life. So I do go all over the country, and you can go to the website and send me a message. I love speaking to women's groups and encourage them to speak up and stand up for America.
I'm just laughing because you've got a panel of women here today, Kerby, and we've talked about some pretty male issues when you think about national security and all those things. And it reminds me of when I first came to work at Point of View in 1996 for Marlon Maddox, who founded the program, and he hired me to do women's issues.
Yes.
And it was like 2 days, and I was on the program co-hosting on probably some kind of national security issue, and we realized very quickly that every issue is a woman's issue. There's not really men's issues and women's issues. There are just issues that affect the well-being of our families and our nation, and so we all need to be concerned about them all.
Well, and I appreciate the three of you bringing so much to the table. Three very smart women, very politically astute, and I hope that they would be a role model for some of you listening out there to get involved as well. So all sorts of information today on our website. We've posted 3 different articles. We've posted a video. We have web links. It's all there. And just before we finish the program today, let me also mention that we're coming to the end of our fiscal year. We are dependent upon your financial support, and if you've never given before, maybe you could at least click on that button and give something. It will be doubled. And for those of you that have supported the ministry in the past, thank you so very much. But if you would want to give a special gift so we can end this fiscal year in the black, we would greatly appreciate it. It's all available at the website, pointofview.net. I want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Chris for their help behind the scenes. Have a great weekend. Have a great Father's Day. See you back here on Monday.
You have been listening to Point of View. For materials offered on the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.